I have no idea where I'm going to go this morning as far as my message is concerned. I've told several people that I have a manuscript outline, but I almost guarantee you that I'm not going to follow it. First of all, time has become limited. And second, every time I've gone through my sermon, trying to get it in my mind, get the feel of it, I wander from hither to yon. And I might take you to California and back. You never know. But I am thinking about the challenges that we have as Christians. And I think the challenge to pray is one of the most important. And I venture to say, and I love you all, I want you to know that, but I'm going to say something that might be quite a little offensive, but I don't mean it that way. But I don't think any of us, not even myself, have really discovered the depth of the meaning of prayer. I think all we have done in our life is scratch the surface. And I think there is so much that we need to learn, so much that we need to examine as far as prayer is concerned, that I don't think we even begin to touch the power that Jesus gave. This past week, as I thought about this particular message, I could not help but think about my first full-time ministry. We were quite young, my wife and I. This is before Steve was born, he's my oldest. And I was very inexperienced as far as the work of the church was concerned. I had no idea what to do. I'm pleading ignorance, not stupidity. I don't know whether there's a difference or not. But I went to a small church in Greenford, Ohio, which is up around Youngstown, Ohio. It was a rural community, a community that had great people in it. It was a great church, great people, wonderful people. It was one of those communities that was very tight-knit. But yet I felt welcome into the relationship of the people. It was one of those situations that you dare not talk about anybody because everybody was a relative of somebody else. I think there was maybe 3 or 4 families in the entire community that made up the entire community of Greenfield, Ohio. If you were going down Route 165 in Mahoning County, you would not even know that you were going through Greenford. It was nothing but a crossroad town. And I can remember that there were many, many nights that I would think about the church and what to be done. I think I had many sleepless nights while I was there. Oh, the church was growing. We started out with about what we have right now. And in 3 years' time, we had over almost 100 people in the congregation attending every Sunday. So we were growing fast. In fact, at that particular time, the Lookout, which we have received here, had a contest going on as far as Sunday school attendance was concerned, and we came in 3rd in the nation as far as growth was concerned. So it was a growing church. I remember many times during the invitation hymn that I might have 10, 15 people come forward to place their membership or to be baptized into Christ. We were growing. But even with the growth, even with that spirit, there were issues to be resolved. And as inexperienced as I would lay awake at night in weariness of mind and contemplation and in prayer, trying to determine what to do. It was during those sleepless nights that I found a radio program that I could get out of Detroit, Michigan. And I enjoyed listening to that radio program because they played religious programming. Every once in a while, they would have a Bible study or a preacher. But most of the time, it was nothing but religious music, and I really enjoyed it because it helped set the stage for what I was doing. But there was one minister, evangelist, that would come on about 3 o'clock in the morning that I really enjoyed listening to. I can remember, as I think back of that particular time, he would always be announced as the evangelist of the Ebenezer Church. And because of that introduction, I assumed he was black. I'm not sure, unless it's not a prejudicial statement. I enjoyed listening to him. He was very brilliant in his presentation of the study of God's Word. He had a very idea of how to present things in a challenging way. He didn't mince words, he told it as it was. And even though this was 60 years ago, I can remember details of a sermon he preached on prayer. And many of the thinking that I have today concerning prayer stemmed from that night, 60 years ago, in which I heard him preach on prayer. There were 4 things that stand out in my mind that he said at that particular time. Number 1, I have them listed here. Prayer is not a requisition to God to get him to do what you want, but a submission to discover what the will of God is in your life. Wow, that's a deep statement. Let me repeat that because I think it's important. Prayer is not a requisition to God to get God to do what you want, but it is a submission to the will of God to be done in your life. That was something that I've learned long time ago. And while I pray seeking God's will in my life, oftentimes I don't want to follow God's will. Don't you feel the same way? I think you do. The second thing that he said that particular night, prayer when offered in a proper spirit will always be answered positively, even though you may not receive the answer you want. I think about the unanswered prayers in God's Word. Christ prayed in the garden that the cup might pass from him, but it was not. He also prayed before he went to the garden for the unity of his believers down through the years. And all you can look around the world today, you can find that the church is not united. Even congregations are not there, so that prayer was not answered. We even find that Paul prayed that the thorn in his side might be removed. But God's answer was, my grace is sufficient for you. Even though we do not receive a specific request, I believe that God will answer prayer in a positive way. It was over 3 years ago that we were called to the hospital where my wife was. By the time I got there, she was in a semi-conscious, unconscious state. And I prayed for God to relieve her of the suffering that she was going through. Of course, I wanted her back with me. But God did relieve her. And she's in a better place. The third thing that comes out of there, prayer helps us to receive a pure relationship to God and activates the characteristics in our life that we might become a power to witness to a lost and dying world. Think of what prayer does. I mean, we need to win the world to Christ. We need to bring people to Jesus. And prayer will activate those characteristics that will help us to lead people to Jesus Christ. And every one of us should be concerned about the lost in our community. Oh, I hear about the drug traffic. I hear about the things that are happening in our community, in our whole town of Huntington, in our tri-state area. And I think we need to get busy and preach the gospel, that people might know the joy and the blessings that are there. And the last thing I have listed, that prayer is a greater force in our present time than any weaponry. In that particular day when he preached this, it was the atomic bomb. Now it's a nuclear bomb. And I understand they're getting even greater weapons. That prayer is a greater force